there is a dangerous amount of pleasure in like actually letting yourself feel the power of like what your true self is. Like, you have to decide that the truth within you, like the art that wants to be created within you, or like the identity that needs to be expressed within you, is more important than the outside criticisms every time.
Welcome to A Mutant Manifesto, Frozen Rhizome, as the occupation in Minneapolis winds down visibly, even though it's still ongoing, and like other, crises in the news kind of take precedent in a lot of people's minds. The Israeli attack on Iran. They massacred a bunch of schoolgirls today. I still am bringing Frozen Rhizome to its conclusion for now. And in so doing, I have a conversation lined up today with Ahnika Berg that I'm really excited about. Yeah, and we're going to be talking about essentially art and activism and finding your voice as an activist, as an artist, and some like energetics stuff, and this idea of the erotics of being aligned with your beliefs, the erotics of attunement. So yeah, Ahnika, welcome to Mutant Manifesto.
Thank you so much.
Would you mind like introducing yourself to listeners?
Of course. My name is Ahnika. I'm a photographer and an artist. I'm from Minneapolis originally. I grew up there and moved to Duluth in this past year. I make art about like mental health and like finding meaning and like the creative process and this idea of like energy and faith in something bigger as a whole.
Okay, so you've been in Duluth for the entirety of essentially the escalated, Metro Surge occupation thing.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know, how are you feeling right now somatically about the ICE occupation, and how, just how does it feel in Duluth right now?
It does feel like tension is coming down a bit in that realm. Tension in other realm obviously is always existing, especially with this war that's being started. But in regards to ICE, people had that peak of action and like energetic and like really being pushed into the streets because of that, and that is kind of winding down a little bit. That honestly has a lot to do with like my somatic experience right now, because I just started my bleed and I'm like kind of shedding all of like the emotional and like the energetic process of this entire past cycle, which has been a lot. It kind of catches up to me, and it like returns for processing in the shedding. So I'm kind of just like reflecting and sitting on it all. It's been intense, but not nearly as intense.
Another thing worth noting is that just recently they're like I think it's like Neptune and Aries, Neptune and like Mars are conjunct. Oh, sorry, Neptune and Saturn are conjunct in Aries.
Yeah.
Right now, so that's like a new episode. It's a long. That's going to be a long period of that, and whereas they were both previously in Neptune, or in Pisces. So it's kind of this. There's definitely this is the same alignment that oversaw the Civil War, the American Civil War, and it's also like, we're recently in the Lunar New Year, the Fire Horse. There's a lot of like energy in the stars that's makes a lot of sense for like escalating conflicts.
Yeah. I hope the trend keeps going towards activation for many people. Yeah.
Yeah. Just wanted to mention that. But okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about, like, so what is your artistic practice in a little bit more depth? And can you tell us about, like, what it was like before you got so directly activated in terms of direct mutual resistance?
Yeah. I don't think the creative practice has, like, changed so much before and after that. But for me, like, creativity is getting to the truth of it. It's, like, expressing my experience in the most, like, acute and clear way possible. So for me, much of that has to do with, like, the way I experience the world. And much of that is through, like, the emotional lens through which I experience life. So really, at its core, I would say the creative practice is about energetics in the way that you have to show up fully present for that experience to, like, discern the truth of what your life is at the moment. I've been really committed to my creativity in this way for, like, the past couple of years now, like, treating it as like my purpose and my work. And I spent a lot of that time really just tuning in and, like, figuring out how I can use art as a way to, like, express and transmute that experience, like how I could, like, share what I was feeling with the world in a way that might resonate with others. So when I moved here and, like, didn't know anybody, I like dove in even further, and I, like, cut out a lot of noise, and I, like, really took that practice seriously so that I could, like, get the clarity to, like, show up to the art. And, like, once I have that truth, once I'm, like, sitting in full presence, like, creativity almost always just, like, comes. Like, I get an idea of, like, what I need to express, what I need to write, what I need to paint, or even just, like, showing up with my camera. Like, that has a lot more, like, play to do with it, but just, like, letting yourself play with what wants to be seen in that space. I think after becoming involved more radically, locally, these past few months, it was, like, about 5 months ago that I, like, really ramped up, particularly in terms of, like, what I'm doing and showing up for locally. I think that those concepts just became, like, blatantly obvious in my work. Like, before, they were, like, undercurrents of, like, the purpose that I was showing up for, and all of a sudden I was like, no, I need to, like, say this loudly and clearly. Like, that is at the root of the truth that needs to be expressed.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of, like, showing up fully to the moment. On a previous episode of A Frozen Rhizome, somebody brought up the idea that this revolution is incredibly neurodivergent. And it kind of makes sense because a lot of people have neurodivergent traits in a attention economy that's so overwhelming. And so, like, you know, actually showing up fully to the moment is really difficult and kind of an art in and of itself, I feel like. And I think it's also directly tied to being able to have a cogent response to resistance movements and stuff.
I totally agree and can definitely speak to that. Like, everything is pushing us to not show up in that way. Like, everything in the systems doesn't want that for us, and so to, like, actually make the time to do that is revolutionary. And I know that's really truly a challenging concept for so many neurodivergent people. Like, sitting down and, like, trying to meditate, quote unquote, is not within capacity. But I also think that just looking at that concept through the lens of, like, sensitivity, like people with heightened sensitivity or people with like different ways of seeing the world, whatever. It doesn't have to be sitting still and focusing, like whatever practice gets you into like awareness of your experience and like just meeting yourself in whatever it is, you know, full sensitivity. Like, yeah.
That's really cool. I think that also connects to this, like the shapes that the multiple shapes that your art take. I think that you're somebody, like your actual media are multifold. Like you do writing and photography and spoken stuff, and then like editing and bookbinding of all those different threads are all different parts of your craft. And so I feel like that multivalent aspect of the work that you do kind of allows you to be open to different influences and different resonances, as you say, in a like fluid way, so that like your inspiration has a channel to go in no matter what form it takes in a given session or a given day.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I see it as like ways to complete the picture, you know? Like an image says a lot, but it doesn't say everything. And like if I can supplement that like with the poetry or like with the design surrounding it to like get closer to conveying like the feeling of the experience, I feel like I need to use everything within my reach to do that, because it's the feeling that is the art. Like everything else is just like a means of communication.
That's cool. On a future episode, we will be talking about your photography work and your work surrounding the actual ice formations on Lake Superior in Duluth. Kind of reclaiming, you know, and just spending some time thinking about elemental ice as opposed to like ice. Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited to do that, and we'll get way deeper into like that kind of thing then. But for now, I was hoping we could turn to your activist awakening recently. Can you kind of like trace out how that got started for you and what form it's taken?
Yeah, totally. I've been thinking about like how this actually happened, but it happened very rapidly, like in the past few months, just in terms of like actually what I'm physically doing to show up. However, the journey has been everything of my life leading up to that. Like I've been like politicized since high school. Like a lot of the mental health experiences or like struggles that I've had have to do with like living within the system of capitalism and patriarchy and like everything that can cause a person to feel miserable, right? So like growing up like very aware of all these things, I actually like had the opportunity to visit Palestine like in high school 8 years before October 7th. Like I became like very awake to what was happening. And also, I was a person who was, like, showing up to protests and, like, doing the small things asked of me without actually organizing any of it, right? So there are very different levels of, like, the involvement that I was having until I moved here. And that is a big part of the shift that happened. Like, I moved here specifically with the intention in mind to like root and connect to community. And I was, throughout like the first few months when I didn't know anybody, I was like holding a space in my life for that, so that when I actually like one of my first friends that I met here was like one of the most like politically visible people in this town by chance. So when a few months later we got to like really get into it, it was almost like that vacuum was filled, and I was like already politicized, and I was like wanting this to happen in my life, like wanting to show up for community, and I just like said yes and had the opportunity and like got involved in a lot of things. And like that transition can be a little overwhelming just because not everybody has like capacity for such change rapidly in their life. But because of the way that like I was holding space and I wanted it to happen, I think I like have handled that transition like pretty well.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I like the idea of mental health as one of the arenas through which you become radicalized. There's this idea that I harp on a lot in this podcast that like you need to have exposure to some form of toxin or some sort of ailment or some sort of trouble in your life, oftentimes in order to become radicalized. And I think mental health is definitely an arena that's a lot of people have access to, that you can, if you get the right framework for understanding it, you can understand how it's a collective illness rather than an individual illness, and then that helps you connect to larger struggles.
Totally.
And then also, I think, so like you need to have that understanding. People that need to plant the seeds of like understanding that these things are connected to systems rather than individual faults or like strictly chemical imbalances or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But then also in a similar way, you also, there is like this need for organization in order to transmute the interest in change or like the understanding of evil systems, transmute that into effective action. So I guess I'm kind of curious, like, can you tell me more about the collectives or organizations that you've become part of in Duluth?
Yeah, totally. I became a member of DSA, which is the Democratic Socialists of America. They're a pretty active chapter up here, organizing a lot of actions within the city. One of the first things that I got involved with them is the socialist meal program. They're just like showing up on the streets and like giving out hot meals in the middle of winter, which is a really big deal for a lot of the population that is houseless in like negative weather, right? They're also doing a lot of work within electoralism. So although I don't necessarily think it's a viable like system for change, I've been showing up to city council meetings just to understand like what the leaders of this city are, like what decisions they're making and like what roles they're playing within the town, and have learned just so much by showing up repeatedly to that space. I've also been pretty involved with the organizing around the fight against the proposed Hermantown data center, which has been going on since October, and we currently have like the permitting paused on that project as a result of some organizing efforts, and are strategizing around like next steps and how we can stop that from becoming a huge resource drain on our city. Yeah. Those are the main things that I'm working on right now, but really just like showing up in a lot of different community spaces and like meeting people who have been involved in the work for a long time and like learning how to be an organizer. It's been such a journey over the past few months. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, being in physical spaces has been like a thread of Frozen Rhizome that's been really emphasized for me just in this moment. Like, the internet is great, but it seems like physical spaces are how a lot of this stuff actually takes off. You mentioned that you met somebody in Duluth pretty quickly after you moved there that who connected you to this organizing. Can you tell us, like, is that the main mechanism through which you did link up with a collective, with DSA? And like, how did you meet the person? Like, if that's okay to talk about.
Yeah, it definitely is the main mechanism through which they're an active organizer in DSA and like pulled me to being a part of that. But even within that, I got involved with like a group of friends who is like very highly action oriented, and were like leading a handful of these actions within DSA, and like needed hands-on. So like I met this group, I had a few dinners with them, and I was like, okay, like here are the projects I've been wanting to show up for. I have capacity, let's go. And I do think like a handful of the skills that I was like showing up with just like as a person lend me to just like being able to take on stuff like that. But it was definitely like being put in the right place at the right time to meet those people who like were able to facilitate that like rapid action making. It was kind of serendipitous. Yeah.
Can I ask like what the space was that you met this person in? Like, was it like a coffee shop? Was it your work? Was it
Yeah,
like...
it was my work.
Got it. So it was in like a third space. It was in like a place where it was like a service place, like a food service place.
Yeah, totally. And me getting that job also felt a bit like serendipitous. It was kind of like a fell in my lap type of thing. And sometimes I do look back and I'm like, that feels like I was meant to meet this person, and it felt like I was meant to take that action, and like this is meant to take place in my life because it is what I have been meaning to do for such a long time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that like I've had that experience too in various like crisis moments when I was like, well, I need to be connected somehow. So I'm just gonna physically put myself in a place where people are, and then eventually, you just find. I remember actually, like during the George Floyd uprising in Minneapolis, like it was like that. I was like, well, at some point I got to get involved. I don't know how. Like I got like a pamphlet on the street, but I was like, that doesn't look that interesting. But I still went to the event anyway, and it was like, okay, people are talking about the stuff that I feel like I already kind of know about. But then there was another person there who I saw that a couple people broke away from the main group when there was a police car that went by and was like, they were like tracking it and looking at it. And then I went over with them just to like see if it was all good. And I got connected to them, and that was how I got involved with the more meaningful elements of my resistance during that time. So I think there is something about like, if you think about it, you can think about it both from a materialist or from a like energetics kind of more woo-woo perspective. Of like, the materialist perspective is that if you are in places where a lot of people are, then you just like open the probability of meeting people that will be able to tell you information that they can't just put out on the internet, and get you connected. And then also from a like more like a more esoteric perspective, perhaps, like there's this idea of like different portals that you go through in your life that bring you to different dimensions of what your life can be like, different manifestations of your life, and you need to like make steps in the right direction, just like physical steps, in addition to enchanting for something if you want it. Like if you want to be involved, you can sit in your room and like meditate or pray or manifest being involved as much as you want, but if you don't create some sort of mechanism for the world to meet your desire, then it's a lot harder for that to happen. So I feel like those two things kind of go hand in hand and kind of potentially open the door a little bit to talk about some of this more esoteric stuff. But I guess before we fully go there, I wanted to know, like, so you and your community there, how's it felt, like, and what is the relationship to the ICE occupation in Minneapolis been there? And how's it felt to be, like, kind of on the periphery of that conversation, if that seems like an appropriate way to describe it.
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, in response to you saying that that can be a material level and a spiritual level, I totally agree. Like, you can think about all this stuff all you want, but really you have to, like, put yourself in the position to be open to it when it's ready. And I think that is, like, so real to, like, this concept of, like, mass protagonization as well. Protagonization being, like, each of us realizing that, like, we have to be the ones doing the organizing for it to happen, you know? Like, to be so honest, I didn't even know what it took and everything that was involved in it until I, like, put myself in the position and had the desire to, like, take that action upon myself. So, like, that just speaks to, like, showing up in those spaces and, like being ready in yourself to, like, take on that level of, like, empowerment to, like, create the systems, the changes that you want to see in the systems. But yeah, back to that question of, like, what it has felt like to see this happening in Minneapolis and to be a couple hours away, but, like, in a very different world. A lot of the sentiment and, like, reactions happening here are the direct result of everything that we see. Everybody has, like, connections. Like, I literally grew up there. All of my friends and family are, like, within this space. And the thing about that is that, like, we kind of see it as the pattern of, like, this could very well, like, come here next, you know? So as they were, like, ramping up and, like, sending thousands more agents to Minneapolis, we were also seeing them, like, start to pop up here and there in our town and, like, showing up at the hospitals, and people started, like, following them and, like, taking videos and, like, distributing whistles. And I've heard a lot of regard coming out of Minneapolis being like, we were so unprepared for, like, what the level of organization that needed to happen. But now, like, 2 months later, now that the systems are a little bit more dialed, we've been doing it for a while, like, we're more on top of it and think about how we'll be more prepared for next time. And I think that's a bit of what has transpired here in Duluth. Like, we haven't had the impact nearly to the same level, but we've kind of had that ripple of, like, oh shit, we need to organize now so that when it comes, like, we know who's tracking, we know where the safe spaces are, like, we have those systems of communication and protection in place. And it's seen a lot of people here as well showing up that wouldn't normally do so. And also, it has seen a lot of the stress, like, land on the people who are showing up the most and who have been doing this the longest time. I'm sure that's the case in Minneapolis, too. Like, it falls on the people who know how to do it to explain it to others and, like, show them how it's done and, like, set up systems that can then run on their own. And that stress is real, and it, like, I think we don't even realize it, but it affects the way that, like, we are able to continue showing up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, like, one of the tensions that I've experienced and talked a lot about in Minneapolis is that this is a moment where a lot of people, have been getting on board with, like, collective on the ground street level activism, which is really exciting. A lot of people are really passionate, and it's great. But it's also true that, like, that actually does result in just extra. You need to kind of repeat things that you already know as somebody who's been doing it for a while. And it means that the systems, whether it's information security or, like, spreading protocol or sharing resources and sharing information, you kind of have to do that work a lot more than if you were with people that already kind of have a baseline of understanding about those things. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the way that things go. Yeah, I think that, like, what are you talking about in terms of getting information from Minneapolis, where people have already kind of learned some things, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and so that you can be prepared a little bit more? That is really cool, and I could see that being kind of the way that we continue to transmit this information and this like sentiment of collective community defense in a way that actually was also true for us. Like a lot of organizers from like Rogers Park, Chicago, were sharing what they had learned about collective resistance, specifically against ICE, with us in Minneapolis when the occupation started escalating here. It's kind of this way of transmitting experience across localities, and then like each local group, you know, down to the hyperlocal like neighborhood, has to adapt that for their own needs and their own abilities and their own interests. Yeah, and that's kind of cool, and I feel like that's something that we are building the infrastructure for as well, like this transmission of experience and transmission of organization.
Yeah, it's working smarter than harder, truly. Like there are people who have been doing this for so long, and we don't have to reinvent it. We need to learn the strategies. And I think there are so many reasons that we are not taught those ways to resist, you know? Like they're actively suppressed, and so you have to seek them out. You have to be in communication with one another, and you have to like make yourself aware of like the tradition of resistance that has existed in brown and black communities since the US existed, you know? Like there are people to listen to.
Yeah, and I mean, so like a big part of that oftentimes gets like elided is this concept of revolutionary spirit, revolutionary sentiment. And it's kind of interesting. I feel like this idea of mass protagonization is very interesting in conversation with a concept that I sometimes describe as like oceanic affect or collective sentiment. Like this idea of when you're in a crowd and you're all chanting the same thing, you know, and you actually care about it. There's a distinction there, because I think that sometimes when there's like a chant, some of the chants I think are a little bit like, I kind of am personally not really a chanter a lot of the times, because a lot of the chants to me feel a little bit like nursery rhymey, and sometimes I'm like, I don't really agree with this, or like I don't really feel this. But when you do really feel it, and you are chanting the same thing as like thousands of other people, then all of your voices reverberating off one another, and all of your bodies resounding with the same chants. There's an experience if you tune into it that's like, it's a collective experience. You're actually feeling the body as multiple and the body as a part of a collective, and that is like it's a experience that is outside of the individual. But then it's like in conversation with that, this idea of mass protagonization, which is kind of a new term for me, but this idea of everyone feeling the call to action as individuals. Like, okay, this is the story. Like, here are the stakes. Here's the enemy, or here's the mission, the quest. What are you gonna do, right? Are you just gonna keep putting your head down and doing your labor, your alienated labor, or are you going to try to lift your head up and resist? I think those two things in conversation are pretty interesting. And what I'm trying to say, though, is that there's like a sentiment to it, like a feeling that's necessary, because if it's not there, then there is no reason that you're going to actually show up to these things. Like, you shouldn't like force yourself to go to these things. Like, you go because you want to go and you feel like you need to go. And like, I don't know. Do you have anything there to shed light on?
There's so much there. You're right. Like you're not going because someone told you to. You're going to because you like really believe on a deep level that like this is the way forward through all of these struggles. Oh, there's something that you said in between talking about that, like, connection to the collective versus, like, how it shows up in protagonization, that made me want to talk about, like, genuinely finding my voice a bit. Like, I see it as, like, I think they're connected, but in particular on the protagonization, like, the opposite of imposter syndrome, for real, like, which is so integrated in, like, capitalism. Like, throughout the past, like, year since I lived here as well, I've been trying to get more comfortable with just, like, speaking to a camera more and, like, using my voice and actually, like, articulating, like, what my work is about, and doing that repetitively, like, had put me on the path to, like, training myself to be able to speak out. But even so, after, like, getting involved in organizing, my instinct was to just, like, listen and, like, let the people who had been doing it for longer do what they were doing, because obviously, like, they know how to do it better. And while that's true to some extent, and I need to listen to, like, learn the history and, like, the ways in which we can do it, there was a really significant shift for me in that, like, there was this one day where I left a meeting being like, oh my God, like, how did I get surrounded by people who are, like, so brilliant and smart and committed to this and have been doing it for years? Like, what am I doing here? And I just sat with that, and it made me come around to, like, to some extent, like, what does that matter? Because they need more people here who can do the same thing. And literally, I'm talking myself out of getting involved in change by, like, believing that I'm not the best person to do it. But, like, we're all the best person to do it in our own capacity. And we might not all be leaders at once, but, like, really getting past that, like, oh, somebody else can do it better. Like, I had to leap over that real fast, being like, no, like, if I don't do it, like, either nobody's gonna do it, or, like, somebody might not, like, actually have the resources to do it in the way that I can, right? That is, like, a flip switch within me of, like, I actually have the ability to do those things, and, like, got me to that point of, like, belief of, like, this really matters and I have the capacity to do this. And there is also, that's, like, the individual level of it, but there's something so powerful to speak to, like, the way that we connect collectively, and the way that, like, grounding outside of our own ego leads to even, like, a higher purpose.
Yeah, okay, so well, it's also something that's kind of necessary for art as well. Like, you need to have a belief that what your voice matters and that what you do is good already to some extent in order to do it. I mean, but it's of course tempered with the fact that you also have to be aware that you're not, like, a god, you know, like, you're not like gonna be making the most amazing, like, there's craft as well. There's craft in both of these instances as well that needs refinement and discernment and practice. But that doesn't mean, but you do have to have, like, a belief in your, like, that what you're doing is already beautiful and already inspired to some degree. And then there's also this idea that, like, what is the term? What is the phrase? But, like, it's essentially like, like, showing up for your own needs is an act of solidarity, is essentially the is the thing that I was thinking about. Like, in the workplace, if you are constantly like, bowing your head and being like, oh, my needs don't matter, like, I'm part of a system, then that sets the precedent. It's like you are inspiring others to do the same. And then vice versa, if you say, like, nope, I'm gonna call out sick for whatever reason, even if I'm not, you know, quote unquote sick, you know, whatever it is, if you're caring for yourself and modeling that, then that enables other people, it inspires other people to do the same. And so there's this way that, like, transmitting your own inspiration and belief in yourself does affect those who witness that. And so that's kind of the combination right there. It's like the individual lifting up combined with like a collective awakening as well.
Yes, the way that I have seen like burnout culture, like you're talking about it in a workplace, but the way that that translates to organizing spaces, and we see like the people who are either like the most visible or the most experienced, like taking on so much that they actually like can't keep going, rather than like being able to delegate and organize more horizontally, you know, like it's just like how capitalism like perpetuates those spaces, but is really giving us like such an opportunity to like reevaluate how we show up for ourselves so that we can keep showing up in the lifelong movement of revolution and not just during this little like flashpoint moment, you know?
So you mentioned that like speaking to a camera, like practicing speaking to a camera helped you like in a way find your voice, which is kind of funny because like, you know, we all are kind of, as artists and creators, like we're all kind of like coerced into like engaging on social media, but like everything, you know, you can flip it to your own, you know, you can make it your own. But I guess I'm thinking about ways that you... so I'm curious about that. Like, what has your journey been like for that? And I know that you did some like public speaking at city council and stuff in Duluth, and I wonder if those things are connected. And then the more general question behind that is like, how do you see your art practice feeding your ability to show up in activist spaces on a very like grounded level? If those things are connected, because I see how those things might be.
I love that question.
Yeah, like in line.
They are connected. Yeah. Well, I also for so long disliked the way that I felt like I had to like promote myself through social media. And there was like a really significant switch that happened for me at some point. And none of what I'm going to say changes the fact that like Meta and social media in general are doing really terrible things, and like I don't agree with that. However, I started thinking about like promoting my work, like sharing my work and what I was doing as like a tool for visibility, in the way that like if I really believe about like in my work and that like it has changed my life and like could potentially mean something to somebody else, I'm only doing myself and others favors by sharing it. Like it can only increase like the ripple effect there. So I had so much cringe. I like hated showing up on a camera in that way, you know? And really it was super intentional for me to like just start doing it and like just keep doing it. You don't stop cringing is the point, like, but you like increase your capacity to like feel eyes on you, to like feel some level of like embarrassment, shame, recognition, like whatever comes up, and also like be seen in it. Honestly, it's like a self-acceptance thing that I've kind of had to work through, that like I'm good being seen in everything that like I'm bringing forward, because I have seen myself in that way and I don't have anything to hide. That said, telling yourself that is a lot different than like going and speaking publicly. So I did challenge myself to start doing that. Yeah, just like inspired by people that I was close with showing up to do that and being like, what's keeping me from like also using my voice in that way? Even if it doesn't make a big difference, like it couldn't hurt. And also like another person echoing that, yeah, it's not gonna do anything bad. So I pushed myself like to show up and like speak on it. And I also like spoke at a fundraiser that was happening recently. I would even say that like this and like showing up on a podcast is another like stretch to that of like just like believing in like the what I have to say is like better than not saying it. What was the second part of that question?
I wanted to I mean it's worth mentioning that like a podcast is also like, you know, the height of cringe. You know, it's like there's too many podcasts out there. People say there's too many podcasts. People are making too many things. There's too many things. We don't need more creators. We don't need more music. We don't need more like influencers. So like that's a voice I hear and like feel. By the same token, I think that there's this musician named Daedalus who has this thing that he said on a podcast actually, which was that, you know, the ultimate thing that we're up against is like the void, is like nothingness. And like every single thing that we create or say or do, you know, stretches out the arena of resistance, or whatever you want to say, the pockets of fugitivity, the you know, moments of inspiration that explore alternatives to the void. And so I feel like those things exist within all the forms of creation that we do. And I think that, you know, so like, which is all very cringy and stuff. But yeah, and there's also this idea, honestly, and I don't want to get away from the question was like, so how does art actually inform your ability to be an activist? How does it inform and train you for resistance? But I guess I also wanted to mention, and maybe this is also connected, that another thing that's very cringy is like queerness. It's very cringy to step into your queerness. It's very cringy. I mean, I can say as a gender fluid person that it's very cringy to talk about being gender fluid. A lot of people see gender fluidity specifically as being cringy. Like, even if you accept, like, if you're like a trans medicalist or something and you're like, okay, like, sure, yeah, if somebody like has tits and like uses gender affirming hormones and all that stuff, then like, yeah, you're a woman. But if someone's gender fluid and like they are like, oh, I'm this day and this the other day, and like I don't know, it's like it's almost too much. It's like, okay, like, you know, get over yourself. But that's how queerness has existed for a very long time, is in these spaces of like, really, like you care, like it's almost seen as something that is decadent or is excessive. Like, you don't have to. You want everyone to bow to your own self-understanding, but you could just shut up and just be a man or whatever. You could see it as decadent. You could see it as non-essential. But then the path of like queer liberation is one in which you're stepping into those cringy moments, because you're saying that like, whether it's decadent or not, like this is something that enables me to be my like more empowered self and enables me to experience things and transmit things in new ways that I wouldn't otherwise. And so it's the same thing as like any of this other art stuff. Is like, if you need to say it, if you feel better saying it, then like the world's, it's like it connects to this idea of like it is a form of solidarity. If you're liberating yourself in some elements, you are expanding the arena of your own resistance in some element. And that seeing people do that and sharing that with people, you know, it does open up, you know, avenues. So again, like the thing is, you mentioned queerness too in like a pre-conversation we had. How was your experience with queerness, with art, with leaning into the cringe? How have those things enabled you to be an activist?
Ooh, I think they're all like so related. Like, yeah, you have these voices in your mind like questioning you all the time. Like those voices that are like, yeah, like what do all those labels even mean? Like, or how are they necessary? Or like, what is another podcast created in the world, right? Like, do we even need that? And I would say that those, like, tension points within ourselves, that, like, cringe moment is, like, you confronting the structures meant to limit you. And that is, like, a really, really clear opportunity of how to expand beyond it and, like, really tap into the, like, creative potential and, like, power within those moments. Like, I think about this, like, with queerness in particular, there's always going to be criticisms, but, like, when you actually give yourself the permission to, like, show up in your true representation, when you give yourself permission to, like, bend your gender and, like, present it publicly, like, you get that moment of, like, being seen. And it can be really cringy, and you can be like, oh, wow, this is really scary. And simultaneously in that place, there's, like, the phrase that I used last week is, like, there is a dangerous amount of pleasure in, like, actually letting yourself feel the power of, like, what your true self is. Like, you have to decide that the truth within you, like, the art that wants to be created within you, or, like, the identity that needs to be expressed within you is more important than the outside criticisms every time, you know? I think that leads to activism for me because it leads me to that place of, like, inspiration and power. Like, I am in that spot. I'm like a little scared of what I'm expressing, to the point where I can feel, like, the energetic power in my words and, like, in the art that I'm creating. And the more that I exist within that space, the more energy that I have to show up in other spaces and to, like, actually put in community work and activism. Like, I find that actually having a creative practice and, like, making time to make art, which sometimes feels really frivolous in times like these, I will say, like, it's really, really hard to, like, take a morning to, like, paint when it feels like the world is crashing down. But in doing so, in, like, connecting to that energy of truth, I create such an abundance within myself that I actually, like, enable myself to show up for the rest of the week in organizing spaces where before I would have burned out because I wasn't connecting to that, like, purpose and, like, higher truth. Does that make sense? It's just so easy to, like, forget about making time for joy and pleasure in life that, like, you don't realize how depleted you are. But really, these things, like, are energizing and they make the practice sustainable. Like, I feel like I can keep showing up after the past couple months because of how I go back and forth between, like, reading the news and, like, showing up in organizing spaces, and also, like, giving myself the time to, like, really connect deeply and express in a way that makes me feel so seen and powerful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that you need to have, like, beauty and joy and fun. Have you like Audre Lorde's understanding of the erotic, I think is very relevant here. Like, Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic, talking about, like, the erotic as a thing that, like, awakens and enlivens the experience, and it, like, invites embodiment, and is not just sexual. It's like an inspirational kind of, like, register that you can transmit and can be transmitted to you, kind of like inspiration. And she also has this idea of, like, meeting the gaze, of, like, looking back, of, like, eye to eye, like, meeting the gaze of somebody as being, I don't know, this is kind of, I think you could probably say that that's, like, one of the ways that you can transmit this erotic experience. And meeting the gaze, I feel like you need to be seen while seeing somebody else. And there's ways to do it that's not just about the physical eyes. So, like, if you're gonna be meeting somebody's gaze in a way that's not just with their eyes, but is like their actual gaze, which means that you both have to be there. And I think what's interesting about mutation is that it's constantly stripping away things and like finding new things. There's no one stable you, I think, but you still have to do the work with a capital W of uncovering that and stepping into these new transmutations in order to be able to meet somebody's gaze.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of, I guess that's like there's like a inspiration and like all soft cuddly sparkles to it, and there's also like a real terror to it as well. It is really scary because like even looking into your own self in the mirror, even meeting your own gaze, you find things that are completely unexpected or not great. So then if you meet the gaze of others as well, that's going to be happening too. But I think that's like the thing that art and self-disclosure and like uncovering, like doing the work for yourself and enabling other people to have that emotional experience like you talked about, like framing the thing just right so that they get the same experience, or like that's setting up potential areas for you to like meet people's gaze or for people to like see you. And I don't know. I feel like that is like an essential mechanism of like spreading this collective resistance, spreading this, like metastasizing this resistance.
I agree. Yeah, like thinking back to Audre Lorde's definition of like eroticism and like really letting yourself be witnessed, and also like witnessing, like really just being in presence with another person, like that feels like a really powerful core of what I brought up about at the beginning of like the creative process being about finding truth. Like when you stare into somebody's eyes, you realize things and like you come to like feel what is true. And I think like becoming conscious on a higher level of like systems in power is just like kind of opening our eyes to like witnessing truth on a higher level and like seeing how all of them are connected and how deeply encountered the resistance needs to be.
Right.
It like really kind of requires you to like root down into yourself about like finding what the truth is within yourself that allows you to continue showing up, you know?
Yeah. I really like the idea that like these like cringe points are like these areas that you probably are in like you're experiencing some sort of oppression or resistance, or like those are areas that to explore. Like, you know, I'm free because I'm cringe, as the meme goes, or whatever it is.
Yes, and it's easy to laugh at that, but
yeah,
also
the truth behind the
it's
meme.
just you meeting your limiting beliefs.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
The way that we've like internalized systemic oppression, you know, and like we can only do so much internally. It has to like be turned outward at a certain point because it's not all internal, but I think recognizing how it shows up within ourselves is important.
Yeah, I think that also like the revolution is this, the revolution is that. The revolution has all these different elements, all these different personal elements. And it's easy for me to say it actually, I do perceive that as cringy sometimes when people are like, oh, like, you know, rest is an act of revolution, or like all that stuff. But I really do think that like those things have very much material. Everything is, that's the whole point of this being a rhizomatic experience of resistance. Like everything is very much linked. The material, your ability to show up, your ability to care for people, your ability to care for yourself, disability liberation, you know, animal liberation, spiritual liberation, sexual liberation, queer liberation, being neurodivergent, being a creator, resting, and then also workplace liberation, like labor, all that stuff. It's all part of the same struggle. And it's the reality. And I feel like that's something that I think leaning into these cringe moments, including with your understanding of like theory and leftist sentiment, I think has actual teeth. It's not just a lib thing to say. It's like an actual reality. So that's something that I'm definitely feeling inspired by in this conversation. So thanks for that. Yes, so it is like an hour. Do you have anything else that you want to like say in this session? I look forward to talking to you more about your ice photography. It's gorgeous. And I definitely am also interested if people wanted to see your work, if you want them to go anywhere. But I also want to leave the opportunity for you to say anything or ask anything else before we conclude today.
I think I just, wish I had realized what it means to be action-oriented in the movement earlier, to be honest with you. And I think if there's anybody, listening who feels like they're at that stage where they, are ready and, are curious of how to make it happen, just keep showing up. And honestly, every time you do so, know that even though it is hard and it is, even kind of cringy and scary to show up in new spaces, that it's so important, and that is how it happens. And you learn the skills and it happens over time. And I would highly encourage them to find their space that feels true. Yeah.
Go to the thing, even if it's you already know about it, or even if it's not quite aligned, because you'll find your way.
And talk to strangers even though you're socially anxious. That's super cringy, but also that's how you form community, and that's our most important thing. So just show up. Yeah, that's it.
I like it. Yeah, for sure. It's also been everyone who's been on Frozen Horizon has said the same thing about that. So yeah. So is there anywhere you have some beautiful art stuff and some conversations and stuff that you have on social media? Would you like people to check that out? Is there anything else that you want to direct people to?
Yeah, social media is really the way to find me right now, and hopefully other places in the future. But my username is The River Runs Deep, except in the middle where there should be a double R, there's only one R. And that's how you'll find me. My name is Ahnika Berg.
Okay, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you. This has been such a pleasure. What an inspiring conversation.
Likewise, I do feel the inspiration for sure. It's mutual. All right. Until next time. Bye, everybody.
Until next time.